Hello friends, I am Dr. Ushvinder Kaur from Swami Shraddhanand College, Delhi University. Topic of my lecture is climate resilient cities. Research should be taken in following fields promote smart, resilient and sustainable cities. Every urban area or city is similar in one context that they are urban areas, but each one have their own unique identity and conditions. The planning have to be done kept in mind the individuality of the area and yet community parameters. Firstly, strategic planning promoting energy efficient sources, environment and climate change issues. Secondly, resilience plans and strategies for smart and resilient cities and making implementation action plan. Thirdly, reducing the carbon footprints by usage of environment friendly energy sources. Fourthly, use the remote sensing spatial geospatial modeling and mapping for assessment. Fifthly, review policy, research and analysis. Then we have to understand the climate change and resilience in city planning and governance along with plans of roadmaps, how to head and where to head to these areas. Legal and regularity of framework for efficient service delivery and economic modeling of assets. Modeling and geospatial assessment on energy environment related aspects and exploring climate change implication via urban growth and associated demands. Carrying out energy carbon inventories are most important in urban area and its environment. Estimation of energy consumption and carbon emissions on account of urban sector plans, projects need to be assessed and continuously monitored. Measuring climate change impacts should always be a regular, continuous process. Carrying out climate risk and vulnerability assessments on again regular and continuous intervals. Developing tools and methodologies for climate risk and vulnerability assessment so that the future disasters can be reduced or can be controlled. Urban heat island assessments need to assess and there should be methods and techniques and measures to be adopted to reduce their impact. Providing sustainable solutions for urban infrastructure services, transport, water, waste management, energy, green buildings should be of paramount importance and replicated in various parts of the country. Policy and regulatory research to promote sustainable and resilient urban infrastructure services should be there in all the urban centers. Developing technology applications so that the modern knowledge and techniques can be used to improve the city's situation and resilience. Conducting technical and financial feasibility studies so that financial validity and viability of the events can be assessed. Preparing investment strategies and implement action plans. Implementing pilots and installations so that such models can be replicated in other areas. Conducting monitoring and evaluations and audits of the processes and the activities conducted. Creating knowledge and building capacities so that the local upliftment is always there. Data management, framework and systems to support sustainable city planning, to enhance the statistical and quantification of data. Developing and delivering training programs to urban practitioners and policymakers so that the new knowledge and new information can be adopted and incorporated in urban cities. Developing knowledge, products, toolkits and training modules, discussions, papers and policy briefs, case studies, films and documents should also be circulated so that awareness can be brought about at various fields. Why urban resilience is a very important question. the source argument can be made that it is not only cities but must become resilient. We would also agree the fact that there has to be a working in the rural areas also, so that the immigration of people could be controlled and small farmers are able to live in resilience in their rural setting, and they do not no longer would be interested in coming to the urban areas and create pressures on the urban systems, and thereby also helping in the resilience of urban centers. It is expected by 2050 more than 75% of the world population will be living in urban areas. So it is a very needed effort to promote the well-being of humanity, and must be considered that population is a most important parameter for resilience in the urban areas. The urban resources such as infrastructure, food chains and capacities are always stressed because of inflow of people and growing population. What happens in the city is also affecting other areas, and it is seen in Bangkok flood in 2011. It took the entire value chain, disrupting manufacturing in rural areas also of Midwest United States. So it is a global approach and a global impact which can be seen if there is a calamity or if there is a problem in one part of the world. So we need to share the responsibility of resilience in cities. Building resilience is not a task of a single actor or a single sector or a single country. It has to be a passionate effect of all the countries of the world to be together, and in partners to every sector should create right policies and plans and infrastructure investment along with business to ensure that functioning of our economic system, communities, civic institutions must be organized so that there are flexible, responsive, robust and organizations and individuals who can course skill required, adapt and cope with any adverse situation at the time of crisis. A way of operating can be that ultimately urban areas should be resilient enough to enable poor and vulnerable to become better protected against catastrophic events, for which they are often less prepared than the people with greater access to safety and better living conditions, by providing them insurances and products which can reduce the risk for their lives as well as their residences. So one way of resilience strategies can be meaningful, and it can be important for the people living in the tragedy prone areas or areas which are prone to some kind of natural calamities. So there need to be built a good transport network. Rapid transit system should always be there, which ensures that even poor and lower income category people are also able to afford. Whereas a BRT should also be an alternate source for transportation of such marginal communities. We also need to work long time resilient strategies, particularly in urban areas, for a large part of the city, so that an integrated transformation can take place in the city regions. Resilience is not just for times of stress, it should be there all the time to have a more vibrant, thriving city, and in good times as well as in the bad times. Qualities of resilient of the city is reflective, robust, redundant, resourceful, inclusive, integrated and flexible. Cities are on the front line of climate change. Substantial improvements to the current living conditions and build resilience to future changes in the climate. Step 1 will be to take grips with the problems and the kinds of finance available. You need to take out the best and to reduce the impact of calamities. The large and the growing urban populations of Africa and Asia frequently live in places that are exposed to hazards such as floods and tropical storms, which will become more frequent, and intensity is coming or is also increasing. Also, the intensity of the storm is also increasing. So many a time the towns and the cities are lacking the basic infrastructure and resource. To reduce the risk of such hazards, we need to provide resilience among the citizens and the environment, city environment. The recent assessment of 468 cities worldwide indicated 68% of them are engaging in process of climate adaptation planning, whereas another survey showed that 54 were acting to reduce risk from heat waves, planting trees and carrying out activities, while 30 cities were going to a step further by improving their storm water systems to reduce the risk from flooding and heavy rainfall and storm surges. Low-income groups have used such funds to acquire land in areas less prone to hazards such as floods and storms, or to make small improvements to the land or improve the drainage, or to reduce the risk of flooding in the areas where they are residing. These actions directly respond to their own present day needs and build resilience to the future threat. Climate resilient cities, those which have developed and are structures to help absorb future shocks, stresses and are difficult situations to maintain same along with the new growth functions and structure systems along with its identity. Climate change along with the developmental policy and evaluated. Climate change will impact future cities, spatial patterns, growth and development. The world's population is moving to cities. One half of the global population is already urban. By 2030, at least 61% of world's population will be living in cities. Cities of developing world will absorb 95% of all the urban growth and will be home to almost 4 billion people, almost 80% of the world's urban population, which will be living in the developing countries. What was once dispersed rural poverty is now concentrated in urban informal squatter settlements. Whereas Asia holds one half of the world's slum population of about 581 million, by 2015, 12 out of 15 largest cities of the world will be in the developing countries, and out of which 4 will be in Asia. Climate-related vulnerability increases not only from flooding due to more precipitation and storm surges, landslides, drought, salt water intrusion, typhoons, but also because of earthquakes and other similar hazards, particularly where poor people are having poor quality and ill-maintained infrastructure, low quality building stock and lower resilience of the high-density society comes into play. For example, out of 10 most populous cities in the world, Tokyo, Yokohama, Seoul, Osaka, Quebec, Milan, Jakarta, all are in East Asia, are moderate to high earthquake hazard regions. Similarly, most of them are located along the coast and are vulnerable to the storm sources. So there is a multi-dimensional hazard pronity in these cities which can be seen. Resilient cities need to develop plans with the climate change in new mindset, shelter options which can now be located on marginal lands and in floodplains and steep slopes at densities which can control the urban sprawl. If average densities continues to decline, doubling of developing countries in regard to urban population by 2030 will be result of tripling of their built-up area. It is projected that Asia will be seen as largest increase during this time. While some of its increase is due to natural causes of urban population growth, inefficient land use and planning policy, but are partly to blame the urban sprawl in and around these large cities in Asia. Furthermore, the lack of integrated land use and transport policy often do not allow the efficient compact cities to develop with the clusters of high density nodes that can support mass transit options and efficient grouping of residential development, commercial services and centers of employment. This would create a lower transit emissions, less energy intensive development, and proximity to shelters, services, in case of some emergency or some natural disaster. So this has to be kept in mind, that integrated approach of transportation should be always in frame. Core themes of transport and infrastructure are competent in case of eventualities like evacuation in response to any risk or of disaster. Building design situations of building houses, structure to reduce the damage caused by extreme events. So they should be resistant to floods or earthquakes as per the need of the region they are located in. In renewable energy sources like solar, biogas, wind should be used as a backup during the outrages. Contemporary advanced drainage system to alleviate intense storms or flooding or water channel during the flooding or in the storm seasons. Researchers on mitigation efforts, adaptation of schemes to basic coordination and preparedness should always be there in areas which are prone to some kind of risk. The resilience come into these aspects. The global ranking of resilient cities is interesting to say. At least we can say that there are few cities which are creating some great achievement in the field of resilience, climate resilience. One of them is Copenhagen in Denmark, which has favorable policies with low emission, and all the areas are put on bicycling zones. And second, we can see that Kohan is another city which is blessed with resilient aspects, and people are taking care of their resources and utilizing their resources judicially. In Brazil, the world's first bus rapid transit system with very low emissions and a high percentage of renewable resources with long-term adaptation plans have been incorporated to reduce the personal movement of vehicles. Barcelona, Spain, a solid adaptation, plane grounded metrics, and world has put solar energy into use for various purposes, because they have long sunshine days during the summer season. Stockholm, Sweden, political support and high rates of rail use and aggressive emissions targets, plus all the public parks, help the town to keep its footprint strong. So there is a mass transit system in form of railways which is very abundantly used. In Vancouver, Canada, the goal of the world's greenest city by 2020 has been put into action. 90% of renewable energy portfolios, low emissions per capita, local food sourcing, and lots of LEDs are used in the buildings to reduce the carbon prints into the environment. In Paris, again, there has been a detailed plan and an aggressive greenery drive program has been put into stand, so that the area can be green and it could be more resilient to changing environmental conditions. In San Francisco, USA, again, LED light, LED gleaming buildings are most common sights to be seen, and a group of purchasing program for renewable energy sources also on underway, where solar lights are very cheaply available and abundantly used in these regions. Other areas have public transport systems coming into forefront, so that private vehicles work numbers can be reduced and it can be used as a alibi in case of any emergency. Otherwise, public transit systems are gaining importance in various parts of the world. And in London also, we can see the reduced emissions are because of the public transport and greener vehicle fleets, which helps in removing the problem of areas in regard to protection from the surges because of the river Thames, and 125 kilometers wall was built to reduce flooding. Tokyo, Japan leads in public transport system. Climate action plan is in place, but detailed adaptation plan is not in place, whereas renewable resources are sparsely used without specific mandate. It is an odd list among the top 10. Some of the world's most populous and global countries are also having mixed with smaller and progressive towns. List of these are, for example, which have diversified results like Cape Town, Johannesburg, Kyoto, Melbourne, Sydney, Seoul, Amsterdam, Rome, etc., etc., Sao Paulo, etc., are witnessing changes, and their resilience towards the climate is increasing, and adaptability to more environmental friendly techniques is on the way. Cities are already beginning to build resilience in response to emerging threats associated with climate change. The strategies we are adopting are often win-win results, making them healthier, more attractive places to live in and to do business. Resilience is demonstrate the city's willingness to embrace innovations and culture and overall well-being of the place and better livelihood options within the city. Here 8 examples of action cities have come into picture to foster resilience among areas. Foster resilience. Chicago in United States supporting vertical farms through better zoning, and small greens are grown in these areas along the houses and along the commercial centers. Thanks to every saving technology advances like low energy LED lamps, vertical farms in cities can raise vegetables using fraction of energy and water required by conventional outdoor crops, and without necessarily using pesticides or herbicides, which can cause chemicalization of the food grains and the vegetables. Today, Chicago is the home of world's largest vertical farm of 90,000 square feet facility that grows a wide variety of leafy greens, and is also a vertical farm success is due to part of Chicago's changing zoning laws, which is helping to make it more green. In 2010, to accommodate urban agriculture, introducing provisions for vertical farm operations to run all planned manufacturing districts city-wise was the initiative which led to this kind of greening in the city. One of the key qualities of a resilient city is robustness. It is the city is designed to anticipate and respond to potential issues. Vertical farms are one of the examples of robustness, securing space in urban environments for food production and for utilization within the community, and it is a more organic and nature close approach. Whereas in United States, Innova, using historical data to build robustness in the face of flooding, is into action, and they are trying to reduce the impact of flooding. Another very important example of robustness of urban planning is to use explicitly the downscale climate change information, like in Perry's Climate Change Atlas for infrastructure design. In Innova, the Department of Transportation, Innova State University, and the University of Innova Flood Center used historical rainfall data to forecast peak discharges flow from 2 local basins that had recently experienced severe flooding events, primarily on interstate highways, using climate forecasting and stream flow modeling. Researchers were thus able to estimate future flooding using projected climate data for this region. These revised forecasts were then compared, and then assessment inventory was prepared, allowing analysis of transportation infrastructure. This enabled the department research to identify risk roads, bridges, and other infrastructure, include design elements to reduce their vulnerability to future flooding. Applying the projected climate data provided engineers with higher levels of confidence that their infrastructure could withstand another calamity if it comes in the near future. So that kind of robust approach can reduce the calamities in various parts of the world. In India, for example, there has been hill stations where advertisements are coming that come to Shimla because Delhi is colder than Shimla. So such kind of advertisements are very bad for the resilience of the city, because Shimla no longer is that green which it used to be, say 25 years back. So it is absolutely a concrete jungle than a jungle it used to be. So such kind of issues need to be incorporated in order to reduce the impacts of climate change in these areas. In such a way, we can adapt resilience policy where the local and traditional knowledge can be incorporated to reduce the impact. There are few cities like Jodhpur which have totally banned plastics, and they use they basically use cloth bags for giving any kind of food item or clothes or any other item. So such kind of stringent policy in order to reduce reduce the environmentally non-friendly items into the system can help to resilience of the locals as well as to the local environment. Climate as a concept is also considered in the Delhi environmental revamp, because we are now trying to green our metro pillars in order to provide green environment and a cleaner environment. So this is again a robustness among the Delhi's resilient aspects, where it is trying to build up green belts all along the railway tracks or adapting some social forestries along the roads and the railway lines. For the energy sectors, we have to understand the grids need generate and distribute energy sources. So alternate energy sources in form of solar panels are seen in Faridabad, where they have put it as smart grids all along the parking lot, which is producing electricity for the neighborhood areas. So such kind of resilience among the locals and the policies of the local government can reduce the imprints of climate change in our country. Now, how to create livable climate resilient cities among the Danish capital has to be considered in most of the regions of the world, because they are the most livable and it is not immune to the climate change's impact, like severe flooding, where the people are using energy efficient measures of transportation, where urban planning is of utmost priority among the planners, building climate resilience at the same time by incorporating social policies. Climate adaptation in the neighborhood of Copenhagen designed to store and delay large amounts of rainwater so that the city can avoid the disastrous flooding experienced in recent years due to heavier rainfall. So such kind of events can be reduced by better seepage of flood waters into the drier areas or into areas. So concreting of neighboring roads should be avoided so that water can seep into the neighborhood environment. Worldwide improvement of quality of urban lifestyle is there, and urban cities are designed for both pedestrians as well as cyclists, so that it is an easy way of traveling from one place to another, and it is environmental friendly also. It improves the livability of the citizens as well as builds resilience in the city environment. Singapore, for example, is walking on the same paths of Copenhagen, and they are also developing vertical gardens, and they are also making places like Gardens by the Bay, which is showing the resilience among the residents as well as the planners and policy makers of the city. It's a small country with a lot of gardens and a lot of nature trails, and of course cycling as one of the main modes of transportation in many parts of the city. And there is a heavy tax on the on some roads where the cars move in the interior part of the city, so that it can hinder the large plying of fleets of cars in these regions. So Singapore is learning a lot from the Danish capital, and they are learning from each other how to incorporate resilience among their countries. In order to conclude, climate resilience in cities can be achieved by holistic term and continuous monitoring approach. The means to attain various forms of the area, city as a geographical location, climatic as well as weather conditions, socio-cultural ethos, political will and inclination of economic disparities to be reduced, and visible impact of mechanism adopted for climatic resilience among the inhabitants and among the region itself. Thank you.